What is the role of religion in our ever-changing world? From the NewsChannel 5 network, this is Issues of Faith.
Hello everyone, welcome to Issues of Faith. Interesting topic today. We like to cover all manner of topics on Issues of Faith. And today we're going to be talking with the Executive Director of Recovering from Religion about atheism in Tennessee. Happy to have with us Gayle Jordan. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
So, like I said, we've talked to all manner of people, and I'm fascinated to hear your story. So what is Recovering from Religion?
Recovering from Religion is a nonprofit, and our mission statement is that we seek to provide hope, healing, support, and community for those folks who are questioning or doubting their faith. So it's relatively straightforward. We have a telephone hotline, as you might imagine, and the number is literally 1-844-I-DOUBT-IT. We have an internet chat. We have trained agents, we call them agents, trained volunteers standing by as we speak to take those calls and chats from folks who are questioning or doubting their faith. We also have what we call the Secular Therapist Project, which is a pool of vetted therapists to ensure that they provide only evidence-based therapy, to connect with clients who are looking for that kind of therapist. And we also have local support groups that meet in communities to sort of, it's an extension of our hotline and of our chat, where people can come together, share their experiences, get a little bit of support and assistance. We have a comprehensive resources database of websites and blogs and books and websites that will help someone as they transition through or as they seek to resolve the questions that they may have about their faith.
So how many people do you think are with you on this, or have you touched, I guess, in the many ways that you just described? How many people are calling? How many people do you count in that number?
Thousands. We have thousands. We have been in existence since 2009. We have had our helpline, which is our telephone hotline, and our internet chat for about 2 years. And in that time, we've reached thousands of folks. And when we added the internet chat, we went international. That allows anyone who has internet access to reach out and ask those questions. So we have hundreds of trained volunteers, and we have helped thousands over the months and the weeks.
And what is your story? How did you decide to do this?
I was a religious person all of my life. From the time I was a child, I was a member of a family who was at church every time the doors were open. And I was a fervent believer myself. Through my childhood, through my youth, through college, I met who would be my husband at a Baptist conference center. And then we began to have children, and we became that family where we had our children at church every time the doors were open. And all of my social life and all of my creative life were poured into the church. I had 4 children relatively close together, so when they all became teenagers at the same time, they came to me with what I will label typical youth group Christian questions. They questioned the morality of some of the acts of God in the Bible. They questioned the academic nature of it. They questioned the anti-science in the Bible. They questioned a lot of those things, and I was expecting those questions, and I validated those, and I had taught these children to be relentless in their pursuit for truth. So I agreed with my children that we would go on a search for the answers to those questions. So we began what I term inside the bubble. In other words, we began by going to our pastors, our Sunday school teachers, their youth minister, and we got the expected answers, the party line answers, that God's ways are higher than our ways. There's some questions we'll never have an answer to. They were not very satisfying answers. So then we began to look outside the bubble, so to speak, and we began to study history and anthropology and psychology and theology and different religions. And at the same time, as I said, my children were teenagers. They had begun to be exposed to people of different faiths. And so we would search and we would study and we would come back together. And at one of those conversations, when the 4 children and I were talking this through, one of my children said to me, and keeping in mind that I had pushed these children to always find the objective truth, the truth, and he said to me, if faith can lead a person to be a Muslim, and faith can lead a person to be a Mormon, and faith can lead a person to be a Christian, is faith the best method to determine the truth? And that was the beginning of the end, so to speak. The children, each one according to his or her personality and their birth order and those kinds of things, began to lose confidence in the faith that they had been taught. So as the children one by one did that, I was the tail end Charlie. The children were not as vested in this lifestyle of church that I was, and so they had a little easier time transitioning out. I had a positive experience in church. I had a
So you're not somebody who had a negative experience.
I had a wonderful experience in
and
church.
what I was taught is always it's okay to doubt. And so I'm sure you had been taught that.
Sure.
And it's okay to have questions.
To a point.
And to doubt. And you'd had, I guess, some doubts.
Sure.
But you would overcome those doubts.
I had, as most of us do, we question to a certain point, and then we accept what I termed those party line answers, that there's just going to be some things that we're not going to have answers to, which was suitable to a degree, but what do we do with the conflict? What do we do with those times when the Bible's in conflict with itself? What do we do with the anti-science? What do we do with the morality? And so I struggled a little bit longer than the children did. I spent about a year, it was a dark memory of mine, I spent about a year trying to pretend that I still believed what I no longer believed. And finally I reached the point where I couldn't do that any longer.
So it's one thing to personally kind of step back and say, all right, I have questions, doubts, maybe I don't believe. But then to actually create a whole recovering from religion network. What made you decide to take it from your personal thing to something much bigger?
Sure. I'm not the actual founder of Recovering from Religion. That was Dr. Darrell Ray, and he saw this in 2009. He simply saw a need for a place that would be a resource for folks who are struggling. It might not surprise you to know there's a lot of heavy emotional lifting that accompanies stepping away from one's faith. A lot of life questions, a lot of having to say final goodbyes to people in their death that you didn't say goodbye to. There's a lot of heavy lifting that accompanies that. However, what we find is most folks struggle more with the fractured relationships than anything else. That's the number one thing that we get called for at Recovering from Religion. So Dr. Ray in 2009 saw a need for the organization. Now it has become now what it is, and I've been the executive director for about 2 years, and I can tell you there is a high need for exactly this kind of thing, because oftentimes for people like me, everything changes. Everything changes. Not only do you lose what you based your life on foundationally, but you lose your social environment, you lose your support system. When my children began to leave for college, I was completely alone, which is why I made the decision to stay for a little bit longer than I probably should have, because everything was going to go away. And so Recovering from Religion not only gives a safe space for folks to question and to offer those questions without judgment and to seek some resources to help to resolve some of those things, but then begins to help folks rebuild community. And we start with our online community where they can go in, they self-select which community they want to be a part of. And then they're able to share their story with other folks who are on the same place in their journey. They may be geographically isolated, as we are here in the South in a heavily religious area where you don't have any place to build those relationships. So we start with that, and then they begin to reach out in real life.
And so here we are in a very religious area.
Right.
What has the reaction been? Do you get hostility? What is the reaction been when you say you're an atheist, and then when you say I'm part of this Recovering from Religion organization? What sort of reactions do you get?
So you get the reaction that you probably are able to predict. The first reaction from a lot of religious folks is defensiveness, because it's a personal affront that we even exist in the first place, that we have rejected this belief system, and then the idea that we have a support in place for people who have decided that they no longer have confidence in their beliefs. So we get a lot of defensiveness. There are as many diverse reactions as there are people. There are some folks who are understanding. Maybe they've had doubts of their own and they understand why they still believe. They understand how some folks would come to the conclusion that they don't. And then there are folks who don't have as pleasant a reaction, who, as I said, their first reaction is defensiveness, and then that goes into anger.
When you say the goal, and then we're going to go to break after this question, is the goal to bring people, I guess convert people, for lack of a better word, or bring people to your point of view, or are you just a landing place for people who may already have that position? I mean, would you feel like we're all better off if we would just give up on the whole religion thing?
So I'm glad you asked that question, because it's something that I try to preface every time I do talk about recovering from religion. I try to say what we're not in addition to what we are. We are not a deconversion process. Number one, that's what religion does, is try to convince you that these beliefs are true. We're not trying to convince you that these beliefs are not true. That's something that everyone has to do at their own pace and their according to their own experience. So we are not a deconversion process. And I'll tell you, one of the reasons that we come down so strongly on that, when we train our volunteers, they are not allowed to engage in any kind of deconversion. Number one, we zealously guard our reputation as a place where they can come answer questions without judgment. If we do that deconversion, the word gets out in the community, and then people don't come to us whenever they're struggling. And we are here to help. We're here to try to answer the question, how can we help? When you begin to doubt the faith of your upbringing, as I said, it's seismic for a lot of us. Everything changes. Everything about what we value, how we view the world, how we want to live our life.
How we understand death.
How we understand death, how we understand love, how we understand family, how we understand so many things. And we understand that. Almost everyone who volunteers for recovering from religion has come from some part of the spectrum of religious belief. Not everyone. There are some folks who were raised not to believe, and they don't believe as adults, but most of us volunteers have come from that. We understand the pain that's associated with that. We understand the arduous journey that you're undertaking to begin to sort that out. So we are zealously guarded about our reputation that we are not a deconversion process. We're also not professional counseling. We're peer support. And so we try to point people in the direction of different resources to give them answers to their questions, but we are not counselors. There are things that go far beyond the scope of our internet chat or our telephone hotline. We sometimes have to reference people to a suicide hotline or sex abuse hotline, some kind of a shelter if they're having trouble with that. So we're limited in the scope of what we can do because we are peer support.
We have to take a break.
Okay.
All right, I want to come back and ask you some more questions about just your views on what happens after we die,
Sure.
whatever.
Sure.
We'll take a break. Be
Sure.
back right after this.
Thank you.